53 minutes, that's how long it takes a Russian S-400 crew to reload their launchers. If they're rated excellent, most take longer, and Ukraine knows exactly when that clock starts. Throughout 2025, Ukrainian intelligence mapped Russia's air defense reload cycles with surgical precision. They tracked when systems fired, when crews scrambled to reload, when entire sectors of airspace went temporarily blind. Then they struck. In a single year, Ukraine's elite Alpha unit destroyed $4 billion worth of Russian air defenses, not through overwhelming force, but through patience, through timing, through understanding a fundamental truth about modern warfare. Even the most advanced shield has to blink. The S-400 Triumph. Russia calls it the world's most capable air defense system. NATO calls it the SA-21 Growler. Moscow has sold it for $500 million per battery to countries desperate for protection against advanced aircraft. But every S-400 battery shares the same vulnerability. A standard battalion fires 64 missiles before running dry. Russian doctrine typically fires 2 missiles per target, meaning 32 interceptions, maximum. After that, the regiment, as Russian analyst Alexander Kramchikin bluntly stated, resets. The reload standard for an excellent rating is 53 minutes. In practice, it takes longer, often hours, because spare missiles and transport vehicles must be brought from distant storage facilities. Ukraine's security service, the SBU, understood this arithmetic. Their Alpha Special Operations Center didn't just study Russian positions. They studied Russian routines. The precise moment when exhausted crews began the laborious process of reloading, the windows when radar coverage shifted as systems repositioned, those windows became kill zones. On January 19, 2026, the SBU released extraordinary figures. In 2025 alone, Alpha units' long-range strikes destroyed or disabled Russian air defense systems worth approximately $4 billion. The confirmed kills read like a catalog of Russia's most advanced equipment: S-300, S-350, S-400 long-range systems, Buck M1 and Buck M2 medium-range batteries, Panzer S-1 and Panzer S-2 gun missile hybrids, Tor M1, M2 and M3 short-range interceptors. But Alpha didn't just destroy launchers. They systematically blinded Russia's detection network. Nebo-M and Nebo-U radars, systems capable of tracking targets 600 kilometers away, were hunted and destroyed. Podlet 3-coordinate radars, Niobium, Costa 2E2, Gamma D, and Protivnik GE stations. The 92 N6 fire control radars that give the S-400 its legendary targeting capability. Without these eyes, even surviving launchers became expensive metal. The SBU released verification footage for each kill, not propaganda, evidence. And that evidence showed something Moscow desperately wanted to hide. The multi-layered shield protecting Russian territory had been systematically dismantled. Ukraine's methodology exploited a mathematical reality that no amount of Russian engineering could solve. The attack pattern worked like this. Initial drone swarms would approach Russian positions. Air defense crews, following doctrine, would engage, firing missiles to intercept what appeared to be a standard assault. After the barrage, the critical moment arrived. Crews began reloading, radars shifted coverage, and a second wave of precision strikes would arrive during this vulnerability window. The swarm tactics served a dual purpose. Massed, inexpensive drones saturate sensors and interceptors, forcing adversaries to expend precious ammunition. Each interceptor missile costs exponentially more than the drones it destroys. A Panzer round versus a cardboard and foam decoy represents an impossible economic equation. But the true objective wasn't attrition, it was timing. Force the Russians to fire, wait for the reload, then send the precision strike drones through corridors that should have been impenetrable. Pattern repeated across occupied Ukraine, across Crimea, across Russian territory itself, and Russia couldn't respond fast enough to close the gaps. Moscow faced an impossible choice. Ukraine's strikes were systematically degrading air defense coverage across occupied territory. The instinctive response was to rush reinforcements, pulling systems from elsewhere to plug the growing holes. But this created a cascading failure. Crimean air defenses, repeatedly struck throughout 2025, were supplemented with systems relocated from Russian territory. But when those positions weakened, Ukraine struck there too. Moving defenses from one region created vulnerability in another. Plug one hole, create two more. The Royal United Services Institute documented this dilemma in their December 2025 report. Russia's air defense production, they concluded, rests on fragile foreign supply chains, unsanctioned production nodes, and manufacturing facilities increasingly within range of Ukrainian long-range weapons. The shield was bleeding from dozens of wounds, and every attempt to stop one only opened more. Air defense systems without missiles are just expensive metal. Western sanctions blocked critical imported microelectronics essential for missile guidance systems. Ukraine simultaneously targeted Russian anti-air missile storage facilities, and Russia faced a choice that revealed the true scale of their predicament. Delay promised missile exports to India, a $5.4 billion contract to preserve domestic stockpiles. The delivery timeline for India's remaining S-400 units slipped from 2024 to 2026 to 2027. Russian officials cited the ongoing conflict as the cause. The reality, Russia couldn't produce enough missiles to fight in Ukraine and honor export commitments. According to Stockholm International Peace Research Institute data, Russian arms exports declined 64% between 2020 and 2024 compared to the previous 5-year period. Some analysts reported even steeper drops, up to 92% during the war years. The country that once dominated global air defense sales couldn't arm its own batteries. By autumn 2025, the gaps in Russian air defense had become highways. SBU chief Vasyl Malyuk announced in October that Ukraine had executed nearly 160 successful strikes on Russian oil extraction and refining facilities that year alone, a 51% increase over 2024. Ukrainian drones penetrated areas once considered impenetrable, reaching refineries as far as the Samara region, 900 kilometers from the front lines. The campaign's impact was devastating. Russia faced domestic fuel shortages reaching 20%. 37% of refining capacity was forced offline. Moscow banned gasoline exports through year's end. Rosneft reported a 70% collapse in net income for the first 9 months of 2025. These weren't random strikes. They were the direct consequence of corridors punched through Russia's air defense network. Safe passages, the SBU called them. Routes guaranteed clear because the systems that should have protected them were burning. Range became the critical variable. Reach farther than Russian defenses expected, and targets once considered safe became vulnerable. Ukraine's engineers solved this with elegant simplicity. The AN-196 Lyuty drone, already capable of striking targets 1,000 kilometers from launch, received a modification that perfectly illustrated Ukrainian ingenuity. They removed the landing gear. Without wheels, the drone shed weight and reduced drag. The extended-range Lyuty could now reach 1,300 kilometers, striking the Kupol electromechanical plant in Ijevsk, where Russia manufactures surface-to-air missile systems. Simple engineering change, massive strategic impact. A one-way weapon didn't need to land, and Russian factories that once operated in comfortable safety now lay within reach of drones that cost a fraction of what they destroyed. The economics of this war favor the attacker. A single S-400 battalion costs $200 million to produce. Russia sells complete batteries for $500 million on the export market. Replacing $4 billion in losses would strain the entire defense budget, assuming Russia could produce replacements at all under wartime conditions. Meanwhile, Ukraine's defense industry reached $35 billion in annual production capacity by 2025, with potential to scale to $60 billion. They're producing 4 million drones annually, more than all NATO members combined. The FP-1 long-range drone costs $55,000. The Lyuty, roughly $200,000. Do the math. Destroy a $200 million air defense battalion with drones costing a few $100,000 total. Then do it again, and again, and again. The Russian shield cannot survive these economics. Since January 1st, 2026, Ukraine has targeted Moscow with drones every single day. Not sporadic symbolic strikes, systematic pressure, daily attacks that have forced repeated closures at Vnukovo, Domodedovo, and Zhukovsky airports during Russia's busiest travel period. By January 4th alone, Russian claims indicated 437 drones downed across their territory, 57 over the Moscow region in 24 hours. President Zelensky's August 2025 authorization expanded SBU strike authorities. Now multiple units hunt Russian air defenses simultaneously. Alpha, Shuar military intelligence, the Black Forest Group, Nemesis, the Asgard FPV formations. On January 2, 2026, Asgard destroyed S-350, Buk, and Tor launchers in a single operation. Safe corridors are expanding faster than Russia can close them. The deep strike campaign has entered a new phase of intensity, and the multi-layered air defense shield that Putin once boasted would protect Russian territory has been systematically, methodically, and irreversibly degraded. $4 billion in 1 year. Daily strikes on the capital, refineries burning from the Baltic to the Caspian, and every week the corridors grow wider. Ukraine didn't defeat Russian air defense through overwhelming force. They defeated it through patience, through intelligence, through understanding that every system has a reload window, and every window is an opportunity. The waiting game is over. The darkness has arrived. Russia built the most advanced integrated air defense network in the world. Ukraine found the gaps between the missiles, and through those gaps, they've flown thousands of drones carrying one message: no fortress is impenetrable. You just have to know when to strike.